The courtroom was thick with tension. The overhead lights buzzed faintly, echoing in the silence like a warning no one could quite hear. Lawyers shuffled papers, but said nothing. Reporters stared from the press bench, pens hovering mid-air. The judge looked down at the small figure in the witness chair and sighed. 7-year-old Mason sat stiffly, legs swinging above the floor, clutching a worn stuffed animal in one hand, a faded plush dog with one ear missing. His eyes didn't wander. He didn't blink. He stared forward, unmoving, silent. The entire courtroom was waiting for him to speak. He didn't. Outside the thick walls of the courtroom, life in the city went on as usual. Cars honked, people sipped coffee, phones buzzed. But inside, time had nearly stopped. This wasn't just another child testimony. This was the testimony, the one that could break the case wide open. Mason's mother sat nearby on the prosecution's side, her hands clasped tightly, white-knuckled. Tears lined her eyes, but she dared not speak. A few rows back, the man on trial, her boyfriend, Brent Keller, sat with an unreadable expression. His defense attorney leaned toward him and whispered something, but Keller didn't react. He was watching the boy, too. This trial had already dragged on for weeks. Evidence was circumstantial. The case leaned heavily on what the boy could say if he ever spoke again. But for months, Mason hadn't said a word, not since the night. Paramedics found him curled up beneath his bed, trembling, whispering nothing but whimpers. Since then, he'd shut down. Not a word to therapists, not to his mother, not even to himself in the mirror. Just silence. Now, here he was, in court, facing the man who destroyed his world. And still silence. The prosecutor cleared her throat, leaned closer to the microphone, and said gently, "Mason, do you remember what we talked about? You're safe now. Do you think you can tell us what happened?" Nothing. Mason's eyes shifted toward the judge, then back to the front. He gripped the toy dog tighter. The room held its breath. No answer. The prosecutor looked helplessly at the judge. He adjusted his glasses and nodded slowly. "We may need to consider a postponement," the judge said. "If the witness is not responsive." That's when the side doors opened. All eyes turned as Officer Dana Hart walked in, dressed in uniform, her police badge gleaming under the lights. But no one looked at her for long. It was the large German shepherd walking beside her that stole the room's attention. Bella, the dog, moved with quiet authority, her dark eyes calm, tail still. She wore a police therapy dog vest and carried an aura of gentleness that made even the most hardened courtroom attendees soften. Some had heard of her. She'd been assigned to help children in trauma cases, never used in a courtroom this directly. But desperate times demanded creative measures. The judge raised an eyebrow, but didn't object. The prosecution had filed the request earlier that week. Officer Dana nodded once and led Bella toward the front. "Your Honor, if I may." The judge gestured his approval. "Proceed." Dana approached Mason slowly, stopping a few feet from him. Bella looked up at her handler, waiting. Mason didn't move. Then Bella did something unscripted. Without a word or command, the dog stepped forward. One paw, then another. She padded up to the witness chair, eyes on Mason. The courtroom stilled. Bella sat down right in front of him. Mason looked down at her, their eyes locked. Seconds passed. Then, quietly, so softly, it was almost a breath, Mason whispered something. Officer Dana, trained to read behavior, leaned in but didn't interrupt. Mason leaned forward and whispered again, this time directly into Bella's ear. His lips trembled as he moved them. His hands slowly released the stuffed dog and dropped to Bella's neck, gently stroking her fur. A shiver moved through the room. Dana knelt beside them, close enough to hear. "Mason," she said gently. "Can I say what you just told Bella?" He didn't respond, but he didn't pull away either. Donna looked up at the judge, voice shaking. "He just said, 'He touched me when Mama was asleep.'" Gasps echoed. The prosecutor dropped her pen. The defense attorney jumped up. "Objection. Your Honor, this is hearsay. The dog is not a certified interpreter." The judge raised a hand. "Sit down, counsel. I'll decide what's admissible." Dana stayed on one knee, watching the boy. Mason, for the first time since entering the courtroom, looked around. The room, his gaze was unsure, like someone adjusting to light after months in darkness. But Bella remained his anchor. He leaned toward her again. Another whisper. Dana's eyes widened. He said, "He told me I'd never tell." The judge sat back, stunned. Mason's mother broke into quiet sobs. Bella, sensing his stress, gently pressed her head into Mason's chest. He held her like a lifeline. The boy's voice didn't rise. His words didn't get louder. But what came out of that small mouth, into that dog's ear, would soon become the key to exposing something far worse than anyone in that courtroom had imagined. And Mason wasn't done yet. The courtroom had changed. The boy who once sat silent and unreadable now leaned into the soft fur of a German shepherd. It was a surreal sight, a child testifying through a dog. But no one questioned it. Mason had spoken, sort of, and every word mattered. Officer Donna knelt quietly beside Bella, her pen ready, listening with steady focus. She knew how delicate this moment was. She had been through dozens of trauma cases, but never one like this. It wasn't her training that held. This together, it was Bella. Mason placed both his hands on Bella's back, his tiny fingers fisting her fur gently. He didn't cry. He didn't shake. He just whispered. "He comes in when the house is dark," Mason said, his voice no louder than the buzzing of the courtroom lights. Dinah looked to the judge, her voice steady. He said, "He comes in when the house is dark." Gasps whispered through the crowd again. The defense attorney stood. "Your Honor, this is completely unorthodox. The child isn't addressing the court. He's whispering to a dog." The judge leaned forward slowly, his voice firm. "Counselor, would you prefer the child say nothing at all? Because that is our alternative." There was silence. The prosecutor remained still, holding her breath. She could feel something fragile unfolding, a glass bridge forming under Mason's feet with each word he gave. Dana refocused. "Can you tell Bella more, Mason? Just talk to her like you were before." Mason looked into Bella's eyes. They were deep, steady, warm. He seemed to melt into her. Then he said, "He told me if I told anyone, Mama would get hurt, that he'd hurt her in her sleep." Dana repeated this for the court. Mason didn't react. He stayed close to Bella, occasionally rubbing her ear or shoulder. "Did he hurt you before that night?" Dana asked, keeping her voice level, calm, non-threatening. Mason nodded slightly, never taking his eyes off Bella. "Many times," he whispered. Dana swallowed the lump in her throat. He said, "Many times." The prosecutor leaned in toward her table, already scribbling furious notes. This was testimony. Slow, delicate, but testimony nonetheless. She could feel the tension building in the room, like an electrical charge. The defense lawyer whispered something to Brent Keller. Keller's eyes remained locked on the boy and the dog. There was no emotion on his face, just a cool, calculating stillness. But inside, his world was cracking. Mason whispered again. Dana froze. "What did he say?" the judge asked. Dana turned to him slowly. He said, "He recorded it." That was the moment everything changed. The room erupted. The prosecutor immediately stood. "Your Honor, I request an emergency recess and a search warrant for the defendant's residence. If there are recordings, We need to secure them now." The judge agreed without hesitation. Motion granted. Court is in recess. Officer Hart, stay with the witness. Reporters flooded out of the courtroom, phones already in hand. The defense team looked panicked. Brent Keller finally looked shaken. Within an hour, police were inside Keller's home. Donna stayed with Mason the entire time, Bella never leaving his side. The boy grew tired, his voice fading after the emotional toll. But Bella remained calm and steady, a presence that kept him grounded. Back at the house, a forensic team found a false panel behind the garage wall. Inside was a steel lockbox containing a hard drive and USB sticks. It was encrypted, but not heavily. Investigators cracked the files by evening. What they found was worse than anyone feared. Videos, dozens, some recent, some from years back. Some labeled with dates, others with names. Some showed Mason, others showed children no one had identified yet. When the first file confirmed Mason's testimony word for word, the prosecution's case turned from fragile to absolute. That night, Officer Dana returned to her unit's quarters, sat beside Bella, and cried for the first time in years. She buried her face into Bella's fur, just like Mason had done, and whispered, "You did it, girl. You really did it." Bella wagged her tail once, then rested her head on Dana's lap. The next morning, the trial resumed. The courtroom buzzed with tension. The judge looked 10 years older than he had the day before. The prosecutor stood, expression grim, and announced to the court what had been discovered. The jury was shown selected clips in private, enough to verify the truth. Brent Keller's face turned ashen. The defense team sat in stone silence. The court recessed again for a full review. Meanwhile, Mason remained in a quiet side room of the courthouse with Bella, crayons scattered on the table, drawing quietly. He didn't ask to go home. He didn't ask for his mom. He just asked if Bella could stay. "Forever, if you want," Dana said gently. When he was asked to return to court the next day, he said only one thing: "If Bella goes with me." And she did. When he walked in, his little hand on her back, the entire courtroom stood not from protocol, but respect. No one doubted the evidence anymore. But what stunned the world wasn't just the hard proof, was that a child who had lived in silent fear found his voice not through therapy, nor attorneys, nor even his mother, but through a police dog who simply sat still and listened. A whisper to a dog had become the loudest scream of justice the courtroom had ever heard. And Mason was just beginning to speak. The courtroom was no longer a place of doubt. It had become a battleground of truth. But the most powerful weapon wasn't a witness or a prosecutor. It was a German shepherd. Bella sat calmly on the witness bench beside Mason, her body still, her eyes alert. Her tail never wagged in court. She sensed the gravity of the space. Mason sat quietly, fingers curled into her fur. He didn't look at the people. He didn't glance at his mother or the judge. He focused only on Bella, like she was the only real thing in the room. And for him, she was. Every morning, Mason arrived at court holding Officer Dana's hand, but never speaking. The moment he saw Bella, though, his demeanor shifted. His shoulders loosened. He breathed easier. He whispered into Bella's ear, the way other kids whispered secrets to best friends. But for Mason, these were not secrets. These were confessions too heavy for a child to carry. On the second day of his testimony, the courtroom braced itself. Mason leaned close to Bella's face and whispered. Officer Dana, crouched beside them, listened carefully, jotting down every word. Then she stood and read them aloud. He said he used to come in even when Mom was awake. She'd pretend she didn't see. The air in the courtroom changed again. Mason's mother gasped behind her hands. Her body shook in her seat. Her attorney gripped her shoulder, as she wept into her palms. The judge looked at the jury. Several members stared at the floor, stunned. The defense attorney stood. "Objection, Your Honor. This is no longer about the defendant's actions. This is shifting into character assassination of a witness not on trial." The judge's voice was sharp, overruled. "If this child has relevant context about the environment in which the abuse occurred, I want it heard." Mason didn't notice any of this. He just whispered again. Officer Dana leaned in. He said, "She told me not to ruin her life." Another wave of gasps rippled through the gallery. The boy's voice, filtered through a dog, carried more impact than a shouting adult ever could. But it wasn't just the courtroom reacting anymore. Outside, media had caught wind of the story. A young child testifying through a comfort dog was rare, but Mason's courage, paired with the growing horror of the abuse case, was rapidly gaining national attention. Headlines hit every news cycle. Boy testifies through police dog shocks court with hidden truths. K9 comforts child witness who brings predator to justice. Police dog unlocks silence in child abuse trial. TV vans lined the street. Protesters began showing up outside, not just for justice for Mason, but for all the children still silent, still hiding. Survivors of abuse, hearing Mason's story, sent letters to the courthouse addressed simply, "To the brave boy," and the dog who listened. Inside, the trial continued. The videos recovered from Keller's home were not just evidence, they were confirmation of everything Mason whispered. Dates, rooms, clothing, it all aligned. Mason's quiet words, murmured into Bella's ears, turned into factual timelines prosecutors could verify with digital evidence. Still, Mason didn't speak to the court. Only to Bella. Dana, now acting almost as an interpreter, stayed close. She refused to let anyone rush the boy. When a counselor offered to help, Mason turned away. But Bella? He clung to her. During a break in testimony, Mason drew pictures with courtroom crayons. One showed a stick-figure dog standing on a cliff, looking down at a smaller figure in a hole. Another showed the same dog barking loudly, with what looked like a monster running away. When Dana asked what it was, Mason said softly, "That's Bella. She shouted for me when I couldn't." By the end of that day, Mason whispered more to Bella. "He had a knife once. He held it to my cheek and said if I screamed, he'd make me bleed." Dana's jaw tightened as she repeated it to the court. He said, "He had a knife once. He held it to my cheek and said if I screamed, he'd make me bleed." The judge paused the proceedings again. The jury looked pale. The prosecution stood up. "Your Honor, the child's statements continue to reveal escalating violence. Combined with recovered footage and evidence, this shows clear intent and cruelty." The judge nodded. "I agree. Please continue." Mason whispered. "Something else." Dana looked confused, then leaned in again. When she stood, her voice cracked. He said, "He made me watch someone else. A girl. I think she cried." The courtroom fell into complete silence. Everyone now understood this wasn't an isolated crime. The case was no longer just about one child. This was systemic. Dana turned to Mason. "Do you want to stop for today?" He shook his head. "No, Bella's not tired yet." The judge allowed them to take breaks as needed. Dana gave Mason water, let him pet Bella, and even play with her paws. The courtroom waited patiently. When Mason resumed, his voice was faint. "He made me lie about it. Said Mama wouldn't believe me." Dana relayed the message. He said, "He made me lie about it. Sighed Mama wouldn't believe me." Then Mason asked a question, not to the court, not to Dana, but directly to Bella. "Will I have to go back?" Dana didn't answer. She just gently squeezed his shoulder. The answer would come later. For now, the boy was speaking. And the world was listening. The courtroom felt like it was walking a tightrope between justice and devastation. But one voice, soft, fragile, filtered through the fur of a German shepherd, was leading the way. Mason's whispered truths had unlocked more than courtroom. Procedure. He had ignited a deeper search for everything that had been hidden. And that search was just beginning. Following Mason's chilling revelation that Brent Keller had recorded the abuse, police wasted no time. That same afternoon, a team executed a search warrant on Keller's suburban home. What they found confirmed the court's worst fears and proved the boy had never been lying. Behind a paneled section of the garage wall, concealed behind heavy storage boxes, was a locked steel safe bolted into concrete. It took a forensic locksmith nearly 4 hours to get it open. Inside were 3 encrypted hard drives, 2 USB sticks, and a notebook filled with handwritten codes and timestamps. The entire room fell silent when the first file was cracked. Inside was hours of footage. Mason, crying, begging, sometimes silent with shock. Other files had other children. One looked no older than 5. The backgrounds were familiar. Keller's bedroom, the guest room, even a school hallway. This wasn't a one-time crime. It was systematic, repeated, documented. The entire courthouse shifted overnight. What had started as a fragile testimony from a silent child became a full-scale criminal explosion. Prosecutors immediately filed additional charges: 42 counts of child abuse, distribution of exploitative material, unlawful surveillance, and endangerment of minors. Keller's face, once smug and stone-cold in court, turned ghost-white during the announcement. He didn't speak. He didn't even blink. He just stared at the floor. Meanwhile, Mason remained in his small witness room at the courthouse with Bella, protected from the chaos. Dana kept the space quiet. No news, no attorneys, no questions. Only crayons, snacks, soft blankets, and Bella. Mason's mother tried to visit. Dana gently turned her away. He's not ready. But you knew. Her silence was louder than any confession. Outside the courthouse, things erupted. National media ran the story on every major outlet. Headlines screamed about the child, the dog, the monster, and the bravery it took to break through trauma. Candlelight vigils appeared overnight in cities across the country. Messages from survivors flooded the courthouse email inbox. Donations poured in for child protection services, for Bella's K-9 unit, for Mason's future. But none of that mattered in the courtroom, not yet. Inside, the judge scheduled an emergency hearing. The prosecutor stood and began presenting the newly discovered evidence. This time, she didn't need to rely on Mason's whisper. The footage spoke for him. Each file shown in court was carefully selected, sealed from the public, and shown only to the judge and jury. Even so, the visible reactions in the courtroom told the story. Jurors shook. One asked for a break to step outside. A clerk cried silently into her sleeve. The judge's jaw tightened more with every passing minute. Still, Mason asked to return to the courtroom, only if Bella could go. And so they did. As Mason entered, holding Bella's leash, the entire courtroom rose again. Not from protocol, from reverence. The judge looked down at him, gentler than before. Mason, would you like to speak? Mason hesitated. He looked at Bella, then knelt beside her, placing both hands on her face, whispering so softly that even Dana had to move closer to hear. Bella didn't move, just listened. Then Dana looked up. He said, "I saw another boy in the videos. I think I met him. He had a spider shirt." The prosecutor froze. "We've seen that boy in one of the files." "Find him," Mason whispered again to Bella. Dana repeated it. He said, "Find him." And so the case deepened. Police began identifying the children in the videos, cross-referencing school records, pediatrician visits, even playground photos. They found 2 more who were still in Keller's neighborhood. One had vanished months earlier. His parents believed he ran away. The truth was much worse. Each new child found validated Mason's story further. Each whisper he gave Bella was backed by physical, digital, or testimonial evidence. Dana had never seen anything like it. He's not just testifying, she told her supervisor. He's unraveling something massive. Meanwhile, the defense was unraveling. Keller's attorney filed to be removed from the case. He cited ethical conflicts and said he could no longer defend a client who had admitted guilt in private. A new court-appointed attorney stepped in, but there wasn't much left to defend. The video said it all. Still, Mason continued to show. Up each day, Bella beside him, drawing, whispering, listening, healing. One afternoon, Dana asked him gently, "Why Bella? Why her?" Mason looked up, blinking. "Because she never asks me why I didn't stop him." Dana didn't say a word. She just nodded and gave Bella a scratch behind the ear. That night, Dana sat alone at home and thought about every child she'd ever worked with. All the questions, all the broken pieces. And she realized Bella had done something no human had managed. She'd made Mason feel unjudged, unpressured, unafraid. The court proceedings moved faster now. Keller's plea deal was rejected. The judge, disgusted, insisted the jury reach a full verdict. The additional charges were added to the indictment. Witnesses lined up. Mason wouldn't need to testify anymore, but he kept coming anyway, just to sit beside Bella, just to be there when justice arrived. On the 5th day of the expanded trial, the prosecutor gave her closing argument. She pointed to Mason. She pointed to Bella. This boy found the courage to speak not through a lawyer, not through his mother, not through fear. He spoke through trust, through love, through a dog who simply sat and listened. If that's not proof of what he endured, I don't know what is. The jury left for deliberation. Mason fell asleep with his hand on Bella's back. He didn't even flinch when the verdict came in. The courtroom was motionless as the jury returned. The bailiff called the room to order. Brent Keller sat rigid in his chair, lips pressed into a thin line, a man who no longer looked in control. His hands trembled beneath the table. His new attorney didn't speak. There was nothing left to say. Mason didn't stand with the rest. He remained seated on the padded bench, Bella's head resting in his lap. The jury foreman rose slowly, holding a folded slip of paper. His voice shook, but his words were sharp. On the charge of aggravated sexual abuse of a minor, we find the defendant guilty. A collective exhale rippled through the courtroom. The foreman continued. On the charge of possession and distribution of explicit child material, guilty. On the charge of attempted intimidation of a witness, guilty. On all 42 counts presented by the prosecution, guilty. Brent Keller's jaw tightened. He didn't shout. He didn't cry. He simply slumped deeper into his chair, a hollow shell of the man who once terrorized children behind locked doors. The judge pounded the gavel. Sentencing will proceed immediately. Mason didn't react at first. He just looked at Bella, stroked her ear, and whispered something. Dana leaned in and smiled faintly. He said, "I thought I'd feel happy." Dana gently brushed Mason's shoulder. "You will," she said quietly. "It just takes time." Then, something no one expected happened. The judge turned toward Mason. "You've done something extraordinary," he said, voice firm but warm. "Most adults couldn't have withstood what you faced. Yet you've helped stop a predator and protected other children." Mason looked up, confused. The judge offered a rare smile. "Would you like to say anything before I sentence him?" Mason hesitated. Everyone watched, breathless. Then Mason stood. Bella rose with him. He stepped toward the witness box slowly, gripping Bella's leash tight. His small frame looked impossibly tiny in that vast room, but his presence felt massive. For the first time since the trial began, Mason addressed the court directly. He didn't speak to the judge. He turned toward the man who'd haunted his nights and stole his voice. "You don't scare me anymore," Mason said, voice trembling but firm. Gasps whispered across the room. A few people clapped softly before the judge raised his hand for silence. Brent Keller didn't look at Mason. He stared ahead, eyes blank. But Mason didn't care. He had already won. The judge sentenced Keller to 5 consecutive life sentences without parole. The courtroom erupted in emotion. Mason's mother wept openly, falling to her knees. Dana remained beside Mason, one hand on Bella's back. Bella didn't flinch. She simply remained routed, like a living monument to everything they had endured together. After court, reporters crowded the steps outside. Camera crews swarmed, but none were allowed near Mason. The court issued a strict protection order to preserve his privacy. Still, the world knew what had happened, and the world was watching. Bella became a hero overnight. Media dubbed her the silent witness, the fur that heard the truth, and America's bravest listener. Dana gave interviews not about the case details, but about the role of therapy dogs in trauma recovery. She described how Bella had built trust where adults had failed. Bella doesn't rush. She doesn't talk. She doesn't ask why or how come. She just is. And for a kid like Mason, that's everything. Donations flooded in. A canine therapy program received national funding to expand into other courts across the country. Other children like Mason would no longer face the witness stand alone. Mason, now removed from his mother's custody and living with a foster family trained in trauma care, began therapy immediately. But only with Bella, a special exception, was granted to keep her near him until a more permanent solution was found. His recovery began slowly, one day at a time. Some days he didn't talk at all. Some days he drew pictures of monsters with red eyes and dogs with golden halos. Other days he simply sat in silence with Bella, but he was never alone again. Months passed. Mason began reading again. He practiced aloud with Bella as his audience. He stopped flinching when the door creaked or when someone raised their voice. His foster parents, both trauma-informed educators, gave him the space to feel safe without demanding progress. It was Bella who marked each milestone. When Mason laughed for the first time, he was brushing Bella's tail. When he slept through the night without waking up screaming, Bella was curled at his feet. When he told his foster mom he wanted to go outside and play, Bella was waiting by the door, leash in her mouth. Word spread beyond the legal world. A children's author, inspired by Mason's bravery, wrote a picture book titled Whispers. To Bella, it told the story of a boy who couldn't talk until a brave dog showed him how. Mason approved every page before it was published. The book became a bestseller. Schools read it aloud in classrooms. Pediatric clinics handed it to parents. Libraries shelved it with gold stickers. And children across the nation saw themselves in its pages, not as broken victims, but as brave survivors with stories worth hearing. Through it all, Mason stayed quiet about one thing. Until one morning, he tugged on Dana's sleeve. "I want to help another kid," he said softly. Dana blinked. "You want to what?" "I want to go back, if someone's scared like I was. I want Bella to help them too." It was the beginning of something bigger, because Mason wasn't just a victim anymore. He was becoming a voice. 6 months after the verdict, Mason's life looked nothing like it once did. He now lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood with trees that whispered instead of shouted. A warm kitchen that always smelled like cinnamon, and people who never demanded answers from him, just his presence. That was enough. But Bella was still by his side. The court had made a rare exception. Because of the bond they shared, Bella remained officially assigned to Mason. She wasn't just a therapy dog now. She was family. Every morning, Mason and Bella walked down the same sidewalk to a special school for trauma survivors. His backpack had a patch sewn onto it that read, "I speak when I'm ready." He didn't speak often, but when he did, people listened. One day, a new boy joined Mason's class, Oliver. He didn't speak either. He flinched every time someone shut a book too hard. He cried silently when no one looked. The teachers were kind, but nothing reached him. Until Bella padded over during recess and laid her head on his lap. Mason watched from a distance. He didn't say anything. He just waited. After 2 days, Oliver smiled. After 3, he laughed. After 4, he whispered something no one knew what into Bella's ear. And Mason saw it. The exact moment he'd once lived, when the darkness didn't seem so heavy, because a warm, breathing friend had just sat beside him, asking for nothing but trust. That night, Mason told his foster mom, "I think Bella wants to help again." She smiled, recognizing what he meant. Bella didn't just belong to Mason. She was something more now, an ambassador of survival, a vessel of healing. By spring, Donna had officially established the Bella program, a court-certified project allowing specially trained canine companions to support child witnesses during legal proceedings. But Mason had one condition: no cameras, no names, no pressure. Just Bella doing what she does. Dana agreed. The program wasn't about publicity. It was about restoring dignity. By summer, the program was active in 3 counties. And Mason was there, quietly present in training sessions with new handlers and volunteers. He never talked much. But when he did, he taught them what mattered. Don't ask them to be brave. Just be there while they are. Don't tell them it's okay. Let Bella show them it is. Don't stare. Just sit near. His words, few but powerful, became the guiding principles of the Bella Program Handbook. It wasn't a manual about dogs. It was about silence, softness, and sacred space. Then came the invitation. A national law enforcement conference in Washington, D.C. had heard about the Bella program. They requested a short presentation from the boy and the dog behind the movement. Mason didn't want to go at first. The thought of speaking on a stage sent tremors through his body. But Bella nudged his hand when the letter arrived. And for the first time, Mason said, maybe. Dana worked with him carefully. No pressure, no script. Just a story that only he could tell. On the day of the event, Mason wore a blue button-up, shirt and gray slacks. Bella wore a black vest with gold trim. The word advocate was stitched along the side. The conference room was filled with adults, judges, prosecutors, police chiefs, trauma experts. Then came the moment. Mason walked to the podium. He didn't stand behind it. He sat on the edge of the stage, legs swinging gently. Bella lay beside him, chin on her paws. He held the microphone for a moment, silent. Then he spoke. "People think I'm strong, but I wasn't. I was scared. And I didn't talk. Because when I tried before, they didn't believe me." He paused. The room was silent, but Bella did. She didn't need to understand every word. She just stayed. She listened to all the stuff I couldn't say out loud. A few in the crowd wiped their eyes. And I think other kids need someone like her. Not to tell their story, but to wait for it. He placed the mic down, stood, and walked off stage with Bella. The audience stood, thunderous applause following their exit. But Mason didn't turn back. He wasn't there for fame. He was there for the next kid who couldn't yet say the words that mattered most. Later that month, Dana received a letter. It was from a federal judicial advisory panel requesting consultation to implement a nationwide version of the Bella program, not just in courts, but in hospitals, police stations, and child services agencies. Dana called Mason into the kitchen and showed him the letter. His face lit up. "Bella's going to be really busy," he whispered. But Dana wasn't finished. "There's one more thing," she said, sliding a folder across the table. Inside was a legal document. Adoption papers. For Mason, his foster parents, Mark and Talia Hayes, had petitioned to adopt him. Mason stared at the words in disbelief. He looked at Bella, then at them. "No one ever wanted me before," he said quietly. Talia knelt down, tears in her eyes. "We do. Every day. Forever." Mason didn't say yes. He just threw his arms around them both. Then Bella barked softly, as if sealing the promise. That night, Mason didn't wake from nightmares. He didn't cry. He didn't flinch. He slept with one hand resting on Bella's fur. And for the first time in his life, he dreamt of something other than escape. He dreamt of tomorrow. The morning sun streamed through the kitchen windows as Mason poured cereal into a bowl. Bella sat beside him, tail flicking gently, eyes tracking his every move. Life in the Hayes household had become peaceful, even joyful. The adoption was final. The nightmares had nearly vanished. He was going to regular school again. But that morning, a letter changed everything. Dana showed up unannounced, her face unreadable. She clutched a thick envelope as she stepped into the living room. Mason noticed how tightly she gripped it. "What is it?" Talia asked, her voice tense. Dana sighed. "It's from the district attorney's office." Mason's cereal spoon paused mid-her. "They've reopened the case," Dana said. Mark stood. "Why? It's over." Dana shook her head. "It turns out there's new evidence. Someone from the past, an accomplice, has been arrested. He's talking, giving names. Some of those names were involved in more than just Mason's situation. It's deeper than we knew." Mason set the spoon down. Bella leaned into his leg. "Will Mason have to testify again?" Talia asked quickly. Dana hesitated. "Possibly. But I'm going to do everything in my power to prevent that." The room was quiet. Bella stood and placed her paw gently on Mason's lap. He didn't cry. He didn't flinch. But his fingers curled into Bella's fur. That night, Mason couldn't sleep. He stared at the ceiling, whispering to Bella, "I thought it was done. I thought it was behind me." Bella didn't move. She just breathed, soft and steady. Like always. The next week, Dana visited again, this time with an idea. "We might not be able to stop the trial," she said, "but we can change how it happens." She pulled out a folder labeled, "Special Witness Accommodation Request." Inside were plans to allow Mason to testify via closed-circuit video, with Bella by his side and a therapist in the room. It would protect his identity, shield him from confrontation, and give him comfort. Mason read through it slowly. He looked up. "Do I have to speak?" Dana nodded gently. "Only if you're ready. Only what you remember. Only if you want." 2. Bella gave a low bark. A sound Mason recognized her version of encouragement. "I'll do it," he said quietly. "For the others. So they won't hurt anyone else." Word of Mason's bravery reached others, lawyers, journalists, child advocates. But none of them could know what it truly cost him. The courtroom was prepared. A private testimony room was set up, soundproofed, with cameras linking to the courtroom, where the new defendant sat in silence. This man had been a shadow figure in the original case. The muscle, the enforcer. The one Mason had seen, but never spoken of until now. Mason sat on a soft couch with Bella curled against his feet. Across from him was a monitor showing the judge, jury, and attorneys, but not the defendant. Dana sat beside him, gently guiding. "Mason," she said softly. "When you're ready." He nodded. The room waited. Then slowly, Mason began to speak. He was there. He never said much, but he watched. Every time, the jury leaned in. The judge furrowed his brow. He wore a gray watch, the kind that clicks when you twist it. I used to listen to it tick. It was how I stayed calm. Dana glanced at the prosecutor and nodded. They brought out the man's personal effects from his arrest. Among them was a gray metal wristwatch with a distinctive click. The room went still. Mason continued. He'd stand at the door, and when I cried, he didn't stop them. He just watched. The defense lawyer objected, but the judge overruled. Mason's testimony was clear, precise, too specific to be fabricated. Then came the question that stunned everyone. "Mason," Dana asked, "why didn't you mention him before?" Mason looked down at Bella. "Because he smiled," Mason whispered. "He smiled every time they closed the door. And I thought, if I told anyone, he'd come back." The courtroom fell silent. In the private room, Bella placed her head on Mason's feet, grounding him in the present. He wasn't scared anymore, just tired. After the testimony, Mason was excused. The judge thanked him personally, via video, for his bravery. The prosecution had what they needed. The rest would be corroborated by adult survivors and forensic evidence now uncovered. Back home, Mason didn't want to talk. He just lay on the floor with Bella, both of them silent, both of them safe. Talia came and sat next to them, her fingers gently brushing Mason's hair. "You were amazing," she whispered. "I didn't want to remember," he said. "But I did. You did it for them. I did it for me, too." That weekend, the news spread across the state. The second abuser had been convicted on multiple counts. Survivors from other cases came forward, inspired by the boy with the dog who never gave up. Mason received dozens of letters. Some from kids, some from adults who were once kids. All thanking him. All saying the same thing. "Because of you, I told someone." Months passed. Summer melted into autumn. Mason was no longer the same frightened boy who once stared in silence at a dog in a courtroom. He was stronger now, calmer. There was still healing to do, but something inside him had shifted. For the first time in his life, he believed he was going to be okay. Bella had become more than a service dog. She was his anchor, his protector, his secret keeper. Together, they attended therapy, school outings, and even took part in a children's advocacy campaign. People began calling him the boy with the dog who speaks, because Bella did. Not in words, of course, but in moments. One such moment was coming. It was a warm October day when Mason was invited to a special court event. The state's attorney general had heard his story. They were planning a ceremony to honor survivors who had come forward with bravery. Mason and Bella were to be among the guests of honor. Talia was unsure at first. "Are you ready?" she asked Mason as she helped him button his shirt. Mason looked in the mirror. He nodded. "I'm not scared anymore." They arrived at the courthouse. News crews, child advocates, officers, and courtroom officials stood together on the steps. Mason clutched Bella's leash and approached the podium alongside Dana and Judge Callahan. Yes, the same judge from the original case, now retired but deeply moved by Mason's story. The microphone was adjusted. Everyone waited. Dana spoke, first recounting Mason's courage and Bella's role. Then, to everyone's surprise, she stepped back and whispered to Mason, "If you want to say something, this is your moment." Mason froze. Every eye was on him. He looked at Bella, She sat calmly, tongue out, tail sweeping the stone steps. Then Mason leaned into the mic. "My name is Mason," he said quietly. "I used to be afraid to speak, but then I met someone who listened, Bella." The crowd watched, hushed. "She's more than a dog," Mason continued. "She's the first one I told without saying a word. I didn't have to. She just knew." Then Bella did something nobody expected. She barked. Just once. Sharp, strong, perfectly timed. The audience laughed, then clapped. Mason smiled. "She agrees." Then Bella walked forward without command. She stepped up beside the podium and turned to face the crowd. She sat, poised, eyes focused. And she barked again. 3 barks, clear, measured. Then she lay down, crossing her front paws. A ripple went through the crowd. Reporters murmured. Someone asked, "Is she trained to do that?" Talia shook her head, her eyes wide. "No, she's never done that before. Not like that." Later that day, a linguistics professor who worked with therapy dogs would speculate that Bella's barks had a pattern 3 distinct tones. Some thought it was mimicry. Others called it instinct. But to Mason, it meant something deeper. "She said it was over," he told Dana afterward, "and that I did the right thing." That night, news stations aired the moment repeatedly. A little boy, his dog, and a bark that silenced a courtroom. Social media exploded. Did the dog actually speak for him? 3 barks, 3 abusers, 3 convictions. Coincidence? She barked when justice was served. The story went viral. Across the country, other children's courts began to look into therapy dogs for abuse victims. One by one, programs were funded. Bella was featured on magazine covers and in documentaries. But the spotlight never changed her. She stayed the same quiet, watchful, loyal. Mason, now 10, was asked to appear on a national morning show. He refused. "I already said what I needed to say," he told Talia. Bella did too. Instead, he wrote a letter. It was read aloud on air by the host. "When I was scared, nobody knew what to say. But Bella did. She didn't talk. She just stayed. I think that's what kids need the most. Not adults who ask questions, but someone who waits until we're ready. I think Bella saved me. I want her to save others too." Donations poured in for the therapy dog center that trained Bella. The Hayes family helped fund new programs for children in foster care. Mason even helped design the logo, a paw print wrapped around a heart. One evening, months later, a letter arrived addressed to Mason. Inside was a note from a 14-year-old boy in Michigan. "I never told anyone what happened to me. But I saw your story, and then I told my dog, and then my mom, and then the police. They believed me because of you." Mason read it over and over. He handed it to Talia, then to Mark. Nobody said anything for a long time. That night, as Mason lay in bed, Bella jumped up beside him, something she rarely did anymore. He whispered, "You know what you did, don't you?" Bella huffed softly, then rested her head on his chest. "People say you barked at the courthouse because you knew." She blinked. "I think you just wanted them to hear what I was too scared to say." Bella's tail thumped. Mason smiled. And then he whispered the words he'd never said aloud, not in court, not in therapy, not even to Talia. "I forgive them. I don't forget. But I forgive." Bella didn't bark this time. She just stayed, as she always had.